is there more that can be done from your perspective that you want? What's your clear message on how we're going to actually make them investable, which you started with some ideas?
Well, I think you're right. There has already been policies put in place. We've got the Hydrogen Head Start Fund recently, the announcement around support for, or a fund for, to facilitate green iron investment, and an innovation fund. So there's a nucleus of that sort of support, but I think we need some larger scale reform, and the key one that we have focused on is the fuel tax credit, because we need everybody operating in the remote areas to turn their focus to decarbonisation if we're going to achieve the targets and actually make a real difference to the planet. Scope 3 I'll touch on a little bit later around green iron and the amount of emissions that are that come from the steel making process. But we do think green iron, and I think the government is on the right path. This is a huge opportunity for Australia to create a new industry. In the past we ship our iron ore to China. We know, and I've been in China recently, that talking to our customers and partners in China, that there is demand for a green product. They do want to reduce emissions and they do want to decarbonise. And Australia is in a great position. We're known as a reliable supplier of iron ore, and we're the closest seaborne journey. However, there are other countries with higher grade iron ore, in Brazil, Sweden, Guinea, and we need to capitalise on that opportunity. It's a sort of future made in Australia agenda. It's processing the iron ore that otherwise we would ship. But that's going to need a lot of focus, and the approvals pathway will be critical, because we could still be 3 or 4 or 5 years' time debating the approvals pathway and caught up in red tape, whereas the opportunity is now to create what we think will be a significant industry for Australia in the future.
Brilliant, thanks.
Yeah, I mean Australia has, I think, over 100 projects on the books. About $200 billion worth of projects that they have under some stage of development, and which is, I think, around 20% of the world's projects. So there is a lot of interest in hydrogen projects here.
So these are projects pre-FID?
Yeah. I think there's some of those have gone through or under construction, but these are. But you would, if you compare that to renewables, there is hundreds of gigawatts of renewable projects under development, and we don't beat ourselves up if not all of them come to fruition. But we're very hard on ourselves at the moment for none of these hydrogen projects getting up.
Yep.
If a small percentage of them get up, that is a great outcome for the country. If they are in green steel, that is transformative for the country. So I think the opportunity is there. We've attracted these projects. We don't expect all of them to get over the line. And how do I guess we stop doing this bubble thing where the last one might have been biofuels, and there's a data center thing that people are sort of getting worked up about at the moment, where we kind of dial it up to 100.
Yep.
Around
and the inevitable.
And then the inevitable slump comes, and then we think that the whole thing's a failure. Whereas, certainly in the renewable sense, that we're one of the leading deployment countries in the world, but you wouldn't think it how we talk about ourselves.
Kellie, it might be worth just quickly distinguishing between green steel and green iron.
Yep, go for it.
There is a distinction. I mean, green steel, I think Whyalla is a good example where there's a focus there on producing green steel. But the opportunity more broadly for the iron ore producers in Western Australia is green iron, which is that next stage of providing a product to our customers in China that will bypass some of the traditional steelmaking process and contribute to significant reduction in emissions. I mean, steelmaking is around 9% of global CO2 emissions. So if we can actually produce a green iron product, which is different to green steel, but just to make that distinction, because I think there's opportunities for both. But we haven't traditionally been a steel manufacturing country.
As an exporter, yeah.
Well, even producing a lot of steel in Australia, quite frankly. China produces 1 billion tonnes of crude steel a year.
Okay, yeah. Point taken. And I think it is also something that struck me as we were just talking then, is we often, a lot of this is about, what's in the media and publicised. And I think there is a real confusion around when we're talking about, the cost of electricity and what we're paying, as consumers, and what it needs to drive down the cost of that. And then what is also needed in for the other sectors. And that's where we get into, and for the economy as a whole, they're not exclusive, but they're two different things in a lot of ways, and how we're tackling it. So that's what we're trying to cover, a bit of both on this panel. Anyway, over to you, Lucy, on this one.
I think it's really important in this dialogue that we really understand the different aspects of the transition here. So I think, as David's outlined, where we're at in terms of grid-connected onshore solar and wind, the reason there's so many projects going ahead is exactly as Brett's outlined. They're economically viable. They compete with fossil today. They are cheaper than fossil today, and there is a lot of momentum for those projects to go forward. But they've been on a journey. If you rewind 30 years, they were not in that place. They were very expensive, they were very nascent, but the fantastic work that's been done has got us to the point we're in today, where this is now a really strong industry and growing industry for Australia. The hydrogen and biofuels sector is in those very early nascent stages. And it's easy to look at all of the projects that are on the books that have started development. But what we need to understand is there was a lot of capital flowing in the 2021-2022 timeframe, thinking that these industries were really going to take off. But they don't compete on their own with fossil today. They will eventually, but they don't today. And so therefore, without innovative, stable policy that really de-risks the investment, and without customers, suppliers and governments working together to a common time frame, these projects aren't going to get built. And that's why we've seen so many announcements in the press of companies going bankrupt because they can't do their capital raising anymore, or projects being slowed right down.
With respect to the hydrogen industry, because I'm a power producer to whoever wants to take it. So, when we were signing PPAs for wind 20 years ago, they were $130. Well, now they're 90 to 100. So, we needed those PPAs, and those PPAs were usually underpinned by federal or state governments 20 years ago to get projects away. And in those days, we built the largest wind farm in the Southern Hemisphere at Warburg, just outside Ballarat here in Victoria, based on a VRET PPA. The hydrogen party bus arrived 4 or 5 years ago, where there were so many projects wanting to get up, and everyone had a project, and the problem was everyone wanted to sell hydrogen, but no one wanted to buy it because it was too expensive. And since those 4 or 5 years ago, where probably we were seeing solar at 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour to 4, I mentioned the price before, 6 to 8 now. That makes hydrogen even less viable. But what I would say is, as Ross was echoing this morning and commenting on, the role of government is to pick a couple of projects and get them up and demonstrate that this will work, because I'm very confident that in 10 to 15 years' time, we're going to have a strong hydrogen industry. I'm just not quite sure what the pathway is to get there at the moment. And I think the government, instead of hydrogen Head Start giving small amounts to lots of people, just pick a couple of projects. And I'm not advocating what they are, because, as I said, I'm not in that industry. Pick them and get them built and demonstrate, and get the industry going that way, because the demand side is not going to drive the outcomes we want at this stage.